Thank you for joining us. So we're here because we want to talk about exclusivity in presenting in the United States and what that really means for us. Um, and it can mean a whole myriad of things. So I am going to ask a few questions, and you all have about 20 minutes to talk about this question. Just, frankly, how you're talking about it. Just imagine us sitting at a couch, on a couch, talking to each other and really like talking about these issues, because it's important that we talk about how dancers of color, dance makers of color are feeling while we're in the midst of this pandemic, how we're going to move forward with presenting Black dance artists. As some of you may not know, but some of you might know that we're already marginalized. We're already kind of put on the bottom of the list or checked off if that presenter already has their one Black dance company for the year. So we want to talk about how we're feeling about it, any ideas, any kind of suggestions, things of that nature. So I'm going to pick a question, one question. Okay, let's start with this one. How are presenters thinking about inclusion in their programming after the first wave of conversations, trends, shifts regarding diversity? So who wants to kind of pick up on that one?
Well, I can start. This should be fun because, we can add Angela to the conversation. Krista and I do this often already. So
awesome.
So this just go feel like home. No, I guess the question is just trying to ruminate on how presenters are going to be equitable, right? And especially with the fact that they can apply for CARES Act funding and whatever pools of streams that are available to presenting organizations. And a lot of artists in the space that I'm navigating are questioning whether they'll be equitable, right? Will those funds go towards making sure to offset fees for artists that they've had to cancel? Francine, I know you and I have talked about this before, where like Dance Iquail has been awarded a NEFA NDP grant, and we're in conversations with with presenters, but now those conversations, even the ones that have been solidified, have been ultimately halted. Mm-hmm. And so what does that do when money is flowing in? Are we hearing people using those funds, presenting organizations or community organizations using those funds to make sure to uphold those conversations towards booking, right? I guess it's an open question, and maybe we should be rethinking what presenting is, who is a presenter, and how to make that financially more solvent and not depend on the stereotypical or traditional representations of presenting. Right. And maybe we're at a moment where we can have that conversation and redefine that for ourselves.
I think, is this the one that I suggested? I think it was one of the questions I suggested. I think I'm also thinking in this question about there have been these waves, and we have been talking about the one Black dance company on the presenting roster, whether you're a manager or you're a theater or right, that we have this one cultural representation. And then we go through these waves, or what is, in my experience, kind of the end of a first wave of people making commitments to diversifying who they present and how they present. And some people have done that well, and some people have done that poorly. But I wonder, like, what is okay, great. We all recognize that we've not done it well. What are we gonna do now, right? Like, who's gonna be brave enough to present all Black dance for the entire season? Just Dance, all the Black companies you can get your hands on. Who's gonna be brave enough to do that for their community? Because that work needs to be done in this season. that's really what that question really is making me think about. And now that we're sitting in this pandemic and we all have sort of this time to think, who's going to decide to shift their organization in such a way that we're brave enough to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good question, really. Like, who is going to be brave enough to do that?
And I think it also levels the playing field a little bit. I know some of the things that I was thinking about when I suggested the questions were, what are the audiences going to look like, and what the opportunities are there to create both new audiences and really think about how to diversify audiences. And I think the biggest way to do that is by diversifying what you're presenting. And I think that it provides such an opportunity for presenters to do that and to look at ways to get new audiences in, because the landscape of what audiences are going to look like after this is going to be crazy too, because we don't know who's going to want to come back to the theater. We don't know. I mean, we just don't know what any of it's going to look like. So I think it's the opportunity that is there to do exactly what you're saying, Crystal, with just, shifting it up. Why not? This is the time to make that change.
Exactly. It is the time to make that change. And back to what you were saying, Crystal, about who's going to be brave enough to do it. I don't know who's going to be brave enough to do it. But then the other question is, if no one steps up, should we? Should we do it? Should we pull together our resources, as limited as they are, to bring this diversity to the forefront and show people what can be done? That's what I've been thinking about. How do we put this together? If a presenter does not want to do it, how do we think about alternative presenting, producing? How does that work?
I'm wondering though, I'm struggling and wanting to put out, can we define two things that are coming up repeatedly? Can we define presenter in the way that we're using it? And maybe there's some edification or reframing and rethinking about what that means and who that is. And then define the it, right? Because it seems to be multifaceted. The it of what we're presenting, the it of what is diversity, the it of who will be in those spaces. So I'm wondering if we can engage in those two conversations, like who is a presenter, and what is the it that we need to think about?
Right. Well, presenter in the general sense is a person or a organization that has a space or access to space that can contract dance companies, theater works, whatever, to be put on their stage, creating their own season, whatever that is. Things are changing. Even before the pandemic, how a presenter categorized themselves was changing, was already in the midst of changing. Changing to co-presenting, changing to co-producing. Things were starting to broaden even before all of this stuff started to happen. And I think that even a dance company can be a presenter. That has happened in the past. I mean, it's so many different ways we can think about it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's something in this question about who is supposed to be doing the labor here.
Right.
Like who's supposed to be doing the work, and the work that's already being done or has been being done for decades in terms of presenting. So for example, our home seasons are versions of presenting.
Right.
Sales 5 series over a year, that's a version of presenting. Someone's city center season is a version of self-presenting. And so we do self-present as organizations, as independent artists. We do that work. I think the thing that we want is for the presenters who are not doing that work or who are doing that work minimally to do it more.
Mm-hmm.
Right, to do it more. So like organizations like IABD, the companies that sit around those tables, the folks who engage in that kind of member service work, our seasons, the work that we do that is self-presenting, you know, we do have skin in the game, you know, we spend economics on putting our own work forward. It's getting presenters, the theaters, presenters, the city, presenter, the community center, presenter, the college or university, whoever has that other economic dollar amount to partner with us in more of that work, further away from our home cities sometimes. And I think that's what we're really saying, right? Like we're kind of like pushing up against what does it mean to share the work broader than the community that we live in, to expand into our global community, and who foots that bill?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that money too. There was a little question in the column, right, about kind of like expanding who gets those granting dollars, expanding, you know, past the it boy, the it girl, the it company on the list, so that there's more diversity in all of those things. And that's also a part of the question.
Right. And it seems to me too, and Angela, I don't know if you were about to jump in, I apologize. You know, the labor aspect of it too, and the inequity there, like who does the labor of the globalization, right? And so in a sense of, and I can use Francine and I's relationship in full disclosure, Dance Iquail is one of Francine's artists, right? It's Sheffield Global Arts Management's clients. And so we have a lot of conversations about the nature of our work with presenting, you know, Dance Iquail's project that's about incarceration. And what does that look like in terms of getting presenters, you know, the partners outside of just people who have theater space, because we're not really necessarily tied to performing this work in a theater for what we hope to get into spaces that will allow us to connect to people who deal with incarceration differently. And the theater doesn't do that work. And Crystal, I know you know this, right? Intangibly. But between Francine and I, what then comes up is with Dance Iquail as one of her clients and another artist that she represents, there's a lot more work that happens to try to get this project up, more so than someone else who might not necessarily see their work as so intertwined to engagement with community, that it makes it more of a labor inequity. And then ultimately it's like, okay, Francine has to decide where she puts her energy. And I'm not making a value that's saying that she is doing that. But if I need to like go into community centers or broken down or non-operational prisons, the labor it takes to get presenters or organizations to see that as value when the representation of the field is, here's a space, we can pay you to come do a couple shows, leaves this inequity in terms of labor. And so it is behooving upon like this question to ask, who does do that labor and how does that labor get paid for equitably?
Right.
I love the concept of shifting what our idea of a presenter is, because just like you're saying, Quail, it's if we are thinking about changing how we have to present or how we have to do our shows and our work in the future, even maybe potentially identifying those organizations or spaces that we can start talking with people within those organizations about what it means to present, even if that's not their space, like not understand, taking it out of the theater realm and putting it in a community center or in a park or in places that might not necessarily be on our radar as presenters, but because we have to think about how we are going to present outside of the theater now that this is happening, we can potentially look to other people to see us and our work as a different way that they can make their dollars flow to us and our projects.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, we can go on and on about this.
Let's go on and on. Let's go. I love it.
Melissa has a little question over here on the side that I think dinged up. Once we're able to our foot in the door, can we talk about the challenge of equitable fee negotiation in that like how folks are choosing who they present or how they diversify? My initial reaction to Melissa's question is, you know, as we're wrapping up this question, there's something about my presumption for a presenter that presenting, there's an ease of presenting, and that there's a limited number of projects that they're gonna put that labor out on that requires kind of that complex community network, that what we want the company or the artist to do is to come in, I want to pay this fee where it fits into my budget, usually small. I only have so much for dance, but I have this much for music, right? Mm-hmm. And I just want you to come in, sweep up the Marley yourself, hang the lights, get in and get out, right? For the $10,000 cap that I have for you or whatever it is, right? And it's like, where is the willingness and understanding about the complexity of dance in terms of those fee negotiations and the required labor to put them in whatever space, right? So the part don't sound easy to me.
Right.
Right? The part brings its own stuff. The theater brings its own stuff. You know, producing dance just brings its own stuff. And I think what I crave for our presenters in negotiating our contracts, in negotiating, you know, the impact that they want to have is that we are like every other art form. We require things to do that in a way that's going to impact our audiences. And part of those things are dollars, people, space. And no matter what the project is, you have to serve that fully. And dance, the bottom of the barrel thinking with dance has to go away in the contract negotiation, and the bottom of the barrel for Black folks in dance got to really go away. Yeah. So I'm, you know, all of that's in there, but we also have to kind of demand of it in our contract negotiations.
And I think piggybacking on that, like artists like Jumatatu Poe, for instance, a couple of weeks ago, put out on his Facebook page, a Google Doc that was viewable about how he structures his tour fees. I think part of that equity in terms of fee negotiation, as you're bringing up, Crystal, also needs us to be open and transparent about what it is and how we structure fees, so that one, we don't get pit against each other, but then two, we let go of that mentality, like you don't need to know what I'm getting paid, because in that is that inequity, right? If we don't figure out a way to be comfortable about sharing that sort of data, then it doesn't allow us to do exactly what you're saying. And so I appreciate that. And I wanted to elevate the fact that like Juma was one of the only artists that I know that actually put his fees and even his budgetary notes about the fees, open copy on Facebook. So I thought that was very brave, because then I was like, oh, wait, I'm selling myself real short in a project where I have 9 dancers. I'm trying to go into the prison. I'm trying to do it in the theater. We're going to have 8 versions, but we're going to have a version so that anybody who wants to buy this piece can buy this piece. But meanwhile, I'm like, that ain't gonna work. You gotta pay this fee, that fee, this fee. You need lights, you need all of this stuff. So yeah, anywho.
And it's so real, because I mean, I can't even tell you the number of times that I know that they are putting me against other people. And then I find out that, and some of, and the rates that I'm like quoting aren't even that high. Yeah. And so it would benefit us all if we are that open, and that we lift each other up by sharing that information, because it's only going to make the next person get paid what they're supposed to get paid, and the next person.
Exactly.
And, yeah.
Awesome. Okay. We're going to switch it up. We're going to do our little game.
Uh-oh.
Uh-huh. We're going to do 2 truths and a lie.
Okay, I hope I get this right. I don't know how this works.
Okay.
This ain't spades. Now, if it was spades, that's not different. This summer is approaching and I'm on spades, so I'll shift my mind to 2 truths and a lie. Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to read them out. This one is about you, Iquail.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So I'm going to read them out, and then you guys are going to have to guess.
Okay.
All right.
Wait, this ain't fair. Crystal know me. We didn't know each other for like 400 years in our spirit.
But I don't know anything.
All right. So the first one is Iquail is a parent of 2 boys. Iquail has lived and worked in 15 countries across 5 continents. Iquail started a path in dance as a 12-year-old grant writer for LGBTQ social service organizations. All right. Which is the truth and what is the lie?
They feel like a little bit true and a little bit a lie.
Ain't that the point of it though?
I'm gonna say that three is the lie. The
3 is the lie.
12-year-old grant writer.
12-year-old grant writer is a lie.
Great. Yeah.
You going with 3 too?
Yeah.
I was gonna say 1, but then like you, Crystal, I was like, but that could be true because he has, younger siblings and cousins and stuff he takes care of. But I'm gonna go with that one.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, my count might be off.
So it's my turn to reveal?
Yes.
So 3 is actually true. I did start off by writing grants as a 12-year-old. Now, the grants probably were horrible. I worked at a social... I'm like, what, I dance in Antarctica?
So you got kids? You got kids.
Side of things with the artists that we're bringing in. And I just am really curious as to considering looking at and how do we use that to our advantage as
I think it's a great question. And also Christy Bolingbrook out of NC Akron and thinking about longitudinal investment. And so part of my work and one aren't in those seats. And that doesn't, and that desire to bring them and have a conversation with presenters saying emotional, mental residue that is keeping them from the theater, and understanding that I can't box myself into say I can do that away from the theater and then work over a longer period of time, not just in a transactional way, to make sure and do will be sustainable, and also that we partner in making sure that is a mutual benefit to the community, because sometimes it can be very transactional. Camille A. Brown, Kyle Abraham, DCDC, any of these Black organizations that are very much caring about Black communities globally. Yeah, we can come in and do a show and get them to the theater, but how are you reinvesting into those people once we are not there? And I think that that's part of the conversation as well that we can have with presenters, and they have to be willing to labor over that work.
Definitely.
I think with our audiences and like what is it that we need or want them to do, I'll go all the way sort of back to the old kind of like butts and seats. Like that's where our concern is. It's like we think that audience member equals a dollar amount, right? And so I could bring 4,000 people to the theater. We could bring, countless people through a digital platform, but like currently in this pandemic, there's a lot of digital content, but it's not necessarily being exchanged for a dollar amount, right? And that's all fine and all gravy currently, right? But we won't be able to do that for a long, that won't be able to sustain for a long period of time unless we really shift the model so that it doesn't care about a person equaling a dollar, right? So that's like part of the conversation, that when we present, wherever we present, there's a capacity for audience, right? And so we have this need to have a feeling of a full house, right? The full house, the standing O house, right? And so that's kind of like the gratification or the emotional clip that we're after a full house and a full bank account. And so I wonder about what our when we're asking about what can our audiences do for us, are there strategies moving forward in a new arts economy where a person doesn't equal a dollar, right? That a person doesn't equal a dollar. And I'm just wondering if we could remove that in some way. I know that companies need money to operate, but how does that look different in sponsorships and support where people are craving to be around, in and around live art, right? So it you know, in a city with 1 million people, in a theater that only sees 1,100 folks, that's not hard to fill. You could have people in the theater every night. So the real thing is like, does your audience want to come?
Exactly.
Who came for their presence?
Right.
And what do we want them to do after they come?
Well,
and
because
be clear about what we want them to do.
Well, because we already know, we have this conversation when we equate bodies to dollars, which is the capitalistic system of America anyway, that we already know that Black and brown audiences historically have that in their body, where their bodies in their persons count for dollars for someone else's bottom line. And so we mistake ourselves in thinking that they don't already know that that's why we're reaching out to them, right? And so that's that residue, right? That's that trauma that keeps them from there. And I actually think I'm doing this movement, like bring them to us, right? But what if we even remove that? Why do they need to come to us, right, wherever the come is, right? Why can't we figure out a way to go there? And that literally is the question that lives with me right now in this new economy, in this new framework of thinking. How can I do exactly what you're saying, Crystal? Get Dance Iquail to have such a relationship with the people that, and I think that's the first and foremost thing, the relationship. I have to have a relationship with these people and know who they are inside and out, so that I can know what they say their needs are, not what I prescribe for them. But then secondly, how can I build upon that relationship and its multifacetedness to allow for them to be in and around dance, not just viewing it from the outside, right? And for me, that might mean figuring out a way to go into the community center, reducing my elitism, right? The colonial elitism that has been implanted in me that says that performing in a sold out Kennedy Center, and not saying I don't want to perform in the Kennedy Center, but the way that the system is structured makes us all believe that that's value as an artist, that you've made it when you have those institutions booking you and you have the Washington Times or the New York Times reviewing you, because then the grant proposals are built on that sort of system. Yeah. But all in that wash, those that are in the community centers bringing dance to the people, as Alvin Ailey said, is not happening. And so how can I reduce this thinking that if I only put myself in a proscenium stage, then I'm somebody, and know that that's not true, and go wherever the people are and do the dance, as long as my dancers are healthy and I'm not putting anybody in adverse conditions for their livelihood.
And that's where I'm sorry, Crystal.
No, go ahead.
I think that's also where the shift in the concept of the presenter is. And I love thinking about that, because I think there is so much more opportunity and so many more sectors of the world that can tap into the work that we're doing, and that will need the work that we're doing after all of this is over. And so just even thinking about it's going to be less opportunity out there to present in the theaters than already is now. So how do we identify those other spaces and share that with each other so that we can start to think about where we can present work in different spaces?
Well, to that point, I appreciate, because, it might also be shifting where our money comes from as well. We know that money for perhaps parks and recreation might go down, but it's not going to disappear. We know that the Department of Human Services and Child Protective Services, those budgets might go down, but it won't disappear, because you're still going to always have people. And so is there a way to, and it takes more work, to get someone perhaps at a community center who also has a lack of a full appreciation about what artists do beyond recreation, to buy into the idea that our programming in partnership with them is mutually as beneficial as computer literacy, and then allow it to be a partnership in which their budgets, which come from city, state, and local government every year, that sort of partnership can also feed into making these programs more solvent outside of just us needing to work with presenter at this theater house, and then they do that relationship that's transactional.
Oh, I'm hearing like here's the arts organization, right? The dance company, and here are the structures and systems that we deal with. Well, we started off talking about the audience, the people that we serve or the people that we want to engage, and they disappear quickly. And so I just want to raise that even when we're trying to figure out how to serve them or how we can be valuable to each other, or like what is their need, or how can they help, increase themselves as a group, they disappeared in the conversation. We went right to the dollar, right to the sponsorship. And I know the tangled circle of that because good and we all think about it, but like, how can we keep the audience centered in the work, right? To like really serve what it is that they need or want. And perhaps not all arts organizations will do that. I think that we need organizations that center what the audience needs and wants. I think that we need organizations that think about what the artist needs and wants. I think that we need organizations that try to do all of that, right? Like we have to kind of come at the bubble from lots of vantage points. But I think that that's really interesting, to start off asking, what do we need our audience to do? How do we need them to be? And right to the funding structure and what the artist is offering. And I know that that's around the community, but I think that they sense that and feel that when they're looking at live art in 2020, and there's so much available online. There's so much available via digital platform. And so when folks are making choices about how they spend their dollar, because their body equals the dollar currently in this capitalist structure, I think that they wonder about spaces where they feel seen, like anybody would, and we're not the only industry experiencing that decline. So when we come out on the other end of the pandemic, what are we doing in this time so that our audience still feels engaged, a part, that they are really understanding the role of the body and the role of the Black body in this like process that we're going through.
And see, I make a distinction because the word "do" for me feels disingenuous. What do we need our audiences to do? I'm advocating that's what needs to change, because I'm more interested in what do our audience say that they need, and how do we do the work to provide the space for them to tell us what they need. And so I'm not interested in making my audience do more work, especially if I'm interested in the types of audiences that are underestimated in terms of their value, their ways of thinking. I'm trying to push back on people imposing that they need to do something. No, we need to do something, but we need to figure out how to do that thing so that it's easier for us to listen to them and provide their needs and their desires versus their actions and labor.
How do we know what they need?
Right.
One of the things, and I'll be happy to share the research that we are doing, but one of the things that I really have been thinking about is what is going to happen after this. I don't have a clue. Like, we have a show that got canceled March 20th, 1920th. It got pushed back to May. I'm sorry, it got pushed to June, and then we just found out last week that it's
just canceled.
Roll it around.
Who knows when it's going to be? But even thinking about it like this, I don't think that our traditional audiences are going to come. I just don't think that that's possible. So we are spending this time doing a lot of having conversations. We have a consultant that's doing some surveying and asking questions, doing some focus group work, just so that we can understand what people are going to need after this. Because I agree. I don't think anything that we produce based on what we think people need or want or anything like that is going to be of value. I really do think it has to be dictated by what people are going to need after all of this, because it's something different than before.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely going to be a challenge. There's just so much going on that how are we going to focus on? How are we going to zoom in on what the audience needs, on what the artist needs, on what the presenter needs and wants, and all of that? It's definitely going to be very interesting in the near future on how we're going to focus on rebuilding, really, because that's what we have to do.
Denise in the chat box asked, is there a national presenters list somewhere? Do we know that info?
I'm not sure if NAPAMA has that list. The National Association of Performing Arts Managers Association, I think that's what it is.
Kristopher also said APAP registration.
Yes, APAP, that was going to be my suggestion. It's like the most cohesive or comprehensive list would be from APAP, because it is a national platform, and national and international platform. So anyone who attends APAP will be on that list. Presenters, artists, associations, service organizations, they will all be on that list. And if you attend any of the regional conferences, you can get information from those lists as well. WA, the Western Arts Alliance, or Arts Midwest, they all have lists as well as the state convenings, local convenings, they also have lists. But a national one, the national one would be with APAP.
Francine, just for the sake of argument, since we're doing this live on Facebook, can you just break down what those acronyms actually are in case people don't know what yeah.
So NAPAMA, and don't quote me on this one. NAPAMA is the National Association of Performing Arts Managers. That's what I believe it is. APAP, Managers and Agents, thank you. APAP is the Association of Performing Arts Professionals. And again, WA is the Western Arts Alliance, and they are a part of the West Coast Association of Presenters. And then Arts Midwest is in the Midwest. They represent the states in the Midwest for performing arts. Yeah, so those are the most known associations in terms of performing arts and presenters and artists. And they will have lists. So if you're looking for presenters, they will be on those lists.
Thank you.
Welcome. Let's move on. That was really good conversation. And I mean, and like I said earlier, we don't have answers. We're just trying to drum up conversation and get the juices flowing so that when we do come out of this, we'll have some idea of how we want to move forward. I was listening earlier to someone saying, being frozen in this pandemic is a detriment. You're not trying to figure out how to move forward. By the time things start to reopen and you don't have a plan, or at least something of a plan, you're going to be left behind. And we don't want that. We are already being left behind, even as prepared and as doubly, aware of what we're doing. We're already being left behind. We're already being left off these lists. We want to be able to maintain where we are and move forward. We don't want to be the ones left out, and people looking at us saying like, well, what happened? We are thinking about these things. So let's move forward. Okay, let's see. What other question we have? Let's go with this question. How might this epidemic provide support for new models of partnerships and cross-section funding and collaborations? So we have already been talking about funding and figuring out how presenters can collaborate with community organizers and the like. Let's talk about that. How can we find new models of partnerships to support the work that we do?
This is like that question my students ask me, like, what's the field of dance gonna be in 10 years? And I'm like, well, you tell me.
Right.
In 10 years, I'm going to be doing it differently and would have passed through a thing. And so I think we are creating them in real time, quite frankly. Folks are trying to figure out, what do they need? What do we really need? One of the things happening at DCDC in terms of working is like, how do you cut the fat? Like, how do we get rid of, like, especially in large institutions, how do you get rid of the busy work? What work is not creating an immediate impact? What stops the flow of information? How can we move more quickly? And as a Black organization, or like what I call sitting at the foot of the elders organization, how can we do that in a way that doesn't slow speed, right? Like, how can we seek counsel and still move forward in budgets and move forward with presenting work? And how can we remove the fear? This is just like more questions to add on. Right. Question, right? But like, we don't know yet, right? Like, we're like 30 days in. And so I know there will be structures at the end. And I think what we will give ourselves a chance to do is to create structures that work for us and stop mimicking one another.
Yeah.
And doing practices that don't work, right? A lot of our institutions have been built off of a model that wasn't set up for us to succeed in anyway. So what I hope happens in this pandemic timeframe is that we go like, what parts of our model wasn't for me? That's why it's not working, and I'm beating my head up against it. And we got 13, folks in the office and 6 million dancers, and like whatever it is that's in our structures that we just say like, no, that's not who the Dayton Contemporary Dance Company is, or that individual artists begin to build structures for themselves that really work for who they are, really work for the work that they want to do. If you don't want to present in a theater, now's the time, because you can't present.
Right.
Right. So maybe you'll find those other ways of presenting. So I don't know that there's a definitive answer to like, what are the things? We are working out what the things are right now. Or at least that's what I think.
I think I agree. I think it's a little bit of a scary time, but it's also I think for me, it's taken a few weeks for me to wrap my head around how to get more creative with how we do things and how we look at things. I am hopeful that this time will inspire people to work more collaboratively. And I know that opportunities are limited, but I think the more that we are open and the more that we work together to like help each other get to the next step. If I find a funding stream, that I'm also sharing it with someone else, and I'm identifying things that I'm sharing, not worried about if they get it or it'll lower my chances if they get it. I'm not really concerned with that. I really just want the information to be shared and for us to all work together to grow opportunity. And I think that I'm excited about the idea of more collaboration. And I know it's hard when we all are looking kind of at our bottom lines and where we need to get to next, but I've seen the most success when people are really open to that. And that's why I loved the discussion earlier that we had a few minutes ago about the transparency, because I do think that we rise together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I would really love, and I don't know if this will ever actually happen, but the people or Black people who have influence, who have money, who have some type of notoriety. I'm talking about the Oprahs of the world. I'm talking about, those types of people, and not even Oprah because she is out there, but those other people who have money, who want to invest, or should, I'm saying they should invest. They should invest in their culture. They should invest in the dance community. How do we reach those people? And I think those people will be the ones. I don't know. I mean, this is just my thought. I really believe that we should really reach out to these people and engage them in some kind of way, so that we don't have to depend on the NEA all the time, and we don't have to depend on any type of other types of funding that has kind of left us out in the cold. I don't know how that's going to happen, but these are the thoughts that I've been having about how do we engage these people who have some type of financial means to help or to assist or to engage or to be a part of in the arts. How do we do that?
So yeah, I'm sitting here trying to formulate my thought. I'm not as fast as I would like to be anymore. I haven't taken my ginkgo biloba or eat my Serena Williams this morning. If I'm not on the tennis court, my brain don't think fast. I want to say I appreciate this conversation. I want to appreciate the fact that in conversations with funders, I had to shift my ideas about them as well. And I agree, we need to radically rethink our structures about dependency, on old models of funding. I also want to appreciate the fact that perhaps in this conversation, I'm coming from a social justice background already, not just about a Black artist doing work for Black community. And what I mean by social justice is really looking at my systems, my structures, my organizational model, the way that the work is created, the way it interacts. And so I'm appreciating the fact that, without seemingly to pat myself on the back, that for me, the way to get at those people is not my focus. Mm. And it goes back to what Crystal said. And I know as a business person, this is going to sound really weird, but the old model is, if you only reach one person in the audience, then the job is well done. And that's a model in terms of social justice practice in the arts that I'm coming from. Mm. And so for me, that helps me trim the fat, because I'm more interested in the people that are on this level. For instance, I think the structures are now, I'm doing the work about incarceration. Why am I not hiring men who had troubled issues with the law? Because they are a resource. They know people, they know tons of people. They have tons of skills, right? But society has allowed me to demonize them. But if I shift my focus and find a way to focus on them, focus on the person that is in NA or AA, Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, because honestly, those are the people from which I come. And I make no bones about being that transparent. And if I don't focus on them, then ultimately, if I focus on them, all the things that I desire to come to me will come to me. I'll continue to do my practices. I'll continue to do my 990s and steward my finances in a way that it makes my organization solvent. But I believe that the way of re-envisioning resources, and I'm saying resources beyond funding, is to invest in those individuals that I claim that my work is about and for, and build them up, because then if I attract them, they have resources that we share bi-directionally, and it's that mutual beneficial aspect that I was talking about earlier. And I may never get to a promised land of a $55 million funded organization built on one work created in 1960. That's amazing. I may not get to that level, but I can get to some level that allows me to reach that one individual and that for me is the job well done. I'm just saying, I might not get to that level ever in life, but I shouldn't be thinking that that's the level I want to try to get to. For me personally, I want to reach those.
Chop out, and then I don't know. I just get crazy. Should I answer
this? The authenticity too. That's the
questions that never goes away.
Right.
It just never goes away. And so I'm wondering, the Oprah. So let me raise Wendy Raquel Robinson. That is right. Has her own arts theater community, or sometimes a lot of people talk about Debbie Allen's work and dance, like she's sort of grown, right? So I'm going to use them as my Oprahs, right? I don't know their economic value. I'm not calling them. I would like to add them to my Rolodex, but
Tyler Perry too, please. Thanks. Great one.
Yes, Tyler Perry.
I'm just going to raise them. I feel like I see things about the work that they're doing in the community. So I guess my question is, how do we engage the foundations or the programming that list of Oprahs, right, those millionaire billionaire dollars are doing, and let them know about Black dance beyond the one or two companies that they may know about, and how they can be supporting geographically or globally what's happening, rather than sort of running to just those two. But that running to the two is a status thing. Mm-hmm. Again, it's back to like everybody's trying to get on the list, the Kennedy Center list, the list, right? And so it sort of loops back to what Iquail is saying here. Like, if those aren't your measures of success, then there might be some things you're going to do in terms of are going to need to do in terms of dollars and resources and reimagining, because your organization might not, its annual budget might not grow in such a way that you'll need to engage Oprah herself, right? That does not mean that the work is not important. But again, I know that we've all heard this, right? I know that we've all heard this. And so the way that we entered this conversation was like, what are the strategies going to be when we get out of this pandemic? You know what I mean? Like, what are the strategies going to be when we get out of this pandemic? And maybe one of the goals is really defining your measures of success, right? So you can get out of the loop of the conversations that might not matter to you as an individual artist or organization, and get into the loop of the conversations that do, right? Like, so if your goal is to find that dollar amount from that Black person or brown person or cultural body that has that money to support, that you're doing that in a way and you're bringing it back into and through your community. If it's not your goal, then you can let your anxiety shoulders down, right? And know that you're doing your good work.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So wait, Denise just said something in the chat box that I absolutely bunk.
Yes.
I'm gonna say bunk them over, because
yes, those damn lists.
Right.
But yes.
Here is the thing that I'm wrestling around with in my own writings and my own working with my organization about the old list. Not all skin folk are kinfolk.
Right.
And I need us to really think about that. Just because we see someone who looks like they identify with our struggle and our lived experience doesn't necessarily mean that even if they have the power of the purse, that they actually care about our experience. And why would we go after people who have money who don't care about our experience? That's all I'm saying.
So true. So true. I mean, yeah. You're absolutely right. But yeah. I mean, we can go on and on and on and on and on about this.
Right.
Like forever. But we have to open it up.
I was just going to say quickly too, looking at the other streams of funding as well, like what Iquail said earlier, in terms of like the Department of Juvenile Justice and Department of Parks and Rec, they have larger streams of funding than any of the arts funders do within the city and state governments. And a lot of the interventions that are getting funded at a really high level within those departments are not good.
Right.
So there's nothing saying that the work that we are creating that would provide value within those different departments can't be just as valuable to those departments. And we are eligible for those streams of funding as well.
That is true. We are eligible for that.
And that goes back to like, are we dealing with people or are we dealing with mission statements? Right. And so like in a lot of spaces, it's like, well, we should be trying to find funding based on our mission. I don't have the proof that what I'm about to say will work, but I know that I'm invested in people. And so I'm invested in finding resources that want to support the people in their complexities, not the mission statement that I happen to put on my website. And that's a totally different model of figuring out, right, where our funding comes. It also requires a lot of labor or work to figure out who your individuals are as people, right? Yeah. So I know that I can know the statistics about Black and Brown Mantuans in that neighborhood of West Philadelphia. But if I know that you know, that Department of Human Resources or Child Protective Services might identify this individual that's in my dance class as part of their clientele, then there's a pool of money because I'm providing a service to that person beyond my mission statement. And yes, it's still part of my mission because Dance Iquail serves to use dance as a way of combating social injustice for Black and Brown Philadelphians. But if I know what my Black and Brown Philadelphians experiences are, then I can say, hey, Department of Ed, Department of Human Resources, I have 15 people that you identify as your clientele. You have $15 million in your budget. Yes, that was a 25% pay cut from your last year's budget, but it's 15 million.
Right. Right. I mean, that is a whole webinar in itself where, you know, we can bring in pros and people who have worked the system, know how to work the system, teach people how to work the system. Because I think the one reason why dance artists or any kind of artists don't go that route is because they don't know how. They don't know how to do it. And it's also a lot of work. It's a lot of paperwork and relationship building that you have to do in order to get this money. But yeah, later on that one, we're going to open it up to our audience with questions. If you've already put in a question, can you put it in again, please, because it's all the way up in this chat scroll. So if you can just put it in again, and we'll try to answer it the best way we can. If you have questions, raise your hand in the chat.
While people are thinking about questions, can I just do my official board member duty of IABD and encourage everybody listening and on this podcast to please enroll in their memberships, keep their membership updated. This is a service that's being provided by IABD that is free of charge and open, but it will also help the organization continue to provide these services. If people keep their membership up to date, then they can find out more opportunities for their investment and their growth by becoming a member and staying a current member.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
And can I add one more pitch? If you are a New York City-based artist on this call, we actually have the opportunity for you to join the membership at no cost. We have subsidized memberships from Howard Gilman Foundation. So you can go to our website under Emergency Fund and apply under the New York City-based tab or button there, and you, if selected, will certainly get some emergency funding if needed, as well as a membership for the rest of the year.
Awesome. Too bad I don't live in New York anymore. Dang.
All right.
Right.
I would still have to pay my full membership anyway, gladly.
Well, while we're waiting, does anyone have any questions? Any questions?
I don't have any questions, but going back to the fee negotiation, my point of view was more or less. Can you hear me? First of all, I have.
Yes,
ma'am.
We can hear you.
Okay, good. Oftentimes, like I said, when you can get your foot into the door with various presenters, I'll just say here in the U.S., one presenter that Dallas by Dance Theater worked with in particular, well, the idea or potential of it, he said, oh, well, we'd love to bring the company in for A because, let me change it. We'd love to bring the company in at B because I know when you all were here 3 years ago, that presenter paid you A, and we want to come under that. And I thought to myself, and he was trying to book out for about maybe a year and a half forward. So I'm thinking, okay, from what you heard, we got paid from 3 years ago. And when you want us to come, which would be about a 4.5 year span, you want to pay us less than that. And I think it was, and I know the different dance companies that he's brought in, Black ones as well as white ones. And I know solely based on what those annual budgets are, there is no way he could have offered that to them. So I felt some kind of way, and I was deeply in my feelings. And the tone of his conversation was almost as if, you know, here's the carrot. Don't you want it? I mean, we're not sitting in Dallas filing our fingernails waiting for a gig. So I told him I would have to respectfully decline his offer. And when his budget had an opportunity to expand, perhaps we can come back to the conversation.
Wow. That's crazy.
So, I mean, I don't even, it's like you know, like we talked about quality versus quantity. If you, as a presenter, are bringing in a group, now this is my opinion, not Dallas Black Dance Theaters, if you are bringing in a group of a lesser quality and you're willing to pay them much more than, you know, the top shelf item, I just don't understand the equity or I don't even have the words. And yes, I'm well aware of the different venues and their budgets and their limitations as well. And I know our fee was quite reasonable. I expected it. So I just wanted to say that to get off my chest. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Melissa. Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have any presenters on this call. And honestly, I don't know if they would be that transparent as to disclose why they would do something like that, you know?
What it brings up, though, it brings up how money is used to value and devalue us against one another, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And that's what we need to fight. That's what we need to strategize against, so that people don't have that power to decide what is of value. It's not like you're buying a house, right? It's not like you're buying a car. Like, you're buying people's lives and their work and their livelihood. And even me using that term, you're buying, is problematic. And we need to create systems and structures and collaborations that erode and circumvent that person's agency and power.
Right.
Side our value. That's slavery.
Melissa, I love that you I love that you said I'm not just sitting around Dallas waiting
Right.
for somebody to book me. Like, I pray that for all of us, that we're so busy and so unbothered, but you know, that's okay. You know, we'll move on.
Yeah, I mean, we all want our work out there, you know, we want to connect with different audience bases, etc. But, you know, there are a lot of things that we just don't have to do. And I don't think any of our organizations deserve to be given go away money. Like, here, take this, you know, I mean, that's just not good enough. That's been not good enough for so long. And so, you know, with me being a new leader of Dallas Black Dance, I just have to, you know, stand up for what I feel is right for everyone involved, because I wouldn't want it for us, and I wouldn't want it for any of, you know, my brothers and sister organizations either.
Yeah. I don't know if there are, I mean, I know Iquail was just mentioning how Jim Atatu put his information on how he itemizes his fees. Is there a way that we could do that, make some data out of that? And when a presenter does come up to one of us and say, hey, you know, we want to give you this fee, we can go, oh, no, and here's the data. And this is why we're worth what we're worth. And either you pay that or you don't. I don't know. I mean,
can I just chime in on that? Like, for a second, like, I think, okay, all of this changed in the last 2 months. So what I'm going to say is a little bit old, but it's a model. A presenter should be spending 60% of what they intend capacity to be. Hopefully that made sense, on the fee, on the artist fee. So if you can calculate, if we can calculate together how many people and what is the average ticket price, we know that approximately 60% of that should be going to the artist, and it rarely does. Now that has to do with the fact that maybe the presenter doesn't, they don't have their own venue, so they have to rent it. Then you've got union houses, like, okay. But this is where the budget transparency works on both sides. We need to see what you're dealing with, and we'll show you what we are dealing with, right? And then I think there's a way to approach it from that model, just doing the math on what their income is going to be, right? They don't want to show us that information.
Exactly. They don't want to show that information, and they want to pit.
But how
us
can we do
against
a
each
deal
other.
without? How can we do a deal with that information?
Right.
Right. How do we know how to be a partner? The presenters invite us to be a partner. In order to be a partner, we have to have full disclosure, right?
Absolutely. I don't know if y'all saw this moment on the Clark Sisters Lifetime movie, where the Clark Sisters was on stage on Sunday and Maddie Moss Clark was backstage while they were singing Full Out. She was backstage like, you got a whole house full of people up here. Where is my money? And it points to exactly what Kristopher is saying, right? Like, I never heard it put in those terms, like the mathematical equation in that way. So I thank you for that. But in looking through our history, we know that was the case. That was how even Black and brown artists was structuring their deals, was literally the exact same way. But the fact that this is the first time I heard someone explicitly name it, I'm really grateful, because now I can go back and even have conversations with Francine and be able to say, it's what Kristopher said and it's what Maddie Moss did. And y'all know
Right.
didn't go on stage without having her $25,000 in her purse before she went on stage. I'm just saying, I'm just bringing up anecdote.
Can I just ask this question to the group? When folks are in charge of budgets, there's a secret reward system for getting as much as you can out of that budget, right? And so I have seen folks go like, I got that company or that artist for this lowball amount. And that makes me uncomfortable. Like, it's like the goal is, how can I get all of this wonderfulness stuffed into this dollar? Why are folks doing that to each other? It's just greedy. Pay
capitalism
what they are worth and ask for what we are worth. And step on if they're not offering it. Like, that's the brave part. Like, when we all sort of go like, I got 14 dancers coming and 5 artistic staff. We all need our own bed, honey. I don't know what to tell you. And I needs to have some room. And we need it. And I cannot ride in the back of the bus overnight to get to your venue. Like, there are just some things we got to cut off.
Well, the issue is also fear. I do think we should continue to do that, right? And I do think we should work toward that. The issue is fear, and it comes in from this idea of locker room talk, right? People who are in private spaces and where they can, blacklist or blackball, because if you decide to do that with presenter A, I know that presenter A is having a conversation with presenter B. And I know that if I walk on presenter A, that presenter B, more likely than not, I hope people would be integral, but I know through the history that, it's more likely than not that they talk. And then I don't get presentation B because of the word of presentation A that happened at the country club or at the locker room talk. And so I think that that's also a fear as well, that why people still take smaller gigs and not like demand higher pay, because then it ultimately relegates them to not being able to make that money and live in a future iteration, even when the conversations aren't directly linked. But Denise, I know Denise was about to say something. Sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. I mean, it goes back to, I'm responding, I think, to Crystal's comment about, the money. It also goes back to the presenting, right? So we have this amazing conference and festival that we do every year. But when we're looking at, the dollars, and specifically this year in Philadelphia at the Miriam Theater, Philly, union costs are out of this world. But when we were very blessed to not pay for the 4 walls. But if we paid for the 4 walls, IABD would have not made any type of profit. And the profit that we made was very, very little. I mean, the whole point was actually just to kind of break even, right? That would be the good thing. But then we were able to make just a little bit of money on top of that. But if we had to pay the four walls costs, we would have been in the red for those performances that we experienced. So to go back to Kristopher's, comment too about like, let's all share the budgets and let's talk about this openly and transparently. It is more than a notion when you're looking at the cost for the space, the theater, the people, the union, all of those things. I mean, even Tiffany, we were doing, this is not even on stage, having, the press in the house, having photographers in the house, you are paying for every little single thing. So then, yeah, how do we balance it on the other side to also pay the artists what they're worth, get them there, the hotel costs, the meals. It's really, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. You got to really work those numbers. Y'all got to work those numbers together somehow. We have to figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go to a question. I don't know if it's still there. Yep, here it is. Anissa Martel on Facebook was asking for us to share what our needs are during this pandemic and moving forward. And then she said she doesn't think that we actually know what our needs will be in the future because things are changing every day. And I agree with that when I don't know what my needs will be once this pandemic is over, but looking ahead or thinking about it now, we can think about what type of resources we'll need or what type of resources we need now. And a lot of resources have been open and available to dance artists. So, how do you feel? What do you think your needs are or will be?
I think a challenge for me and Dance Canvas is that right now we are not in a dire financial need right now. And so I feel hesitant to apply for some of the funding that is out there for artists that are in need right now. But I do know that if this extends through July, then I will be in a position where now we're in a completely different place and a lot of that funding won't be there anymore. And so I think that it's an ask of the funding community to kind of think long-term strategy when it comes to how funds are being created and also being distributed. Because I do know that this is going to be, it's a challenge for me right now to really think about how am I both thinking about other artists in the field and making sure that I'm not taking resources that should be going to people that need it right now, but also preparing for what potentially could happen if this lasts longer than what I know it's going to last.
And I know everybody's moving toward a digital platform. How does that play out for dance? Some people are offering dance online for free. Some you have to pay. How do we get through that? How do we decide on whether we want our work to be aired on digital platforms or not? How do we figure that out? And it will be a part of what the future will look like after this is all over. It will definitely be a part of how performing arts is being presented. How do we take advantage of that? How do we leverage that? Take yourself off of mute, Iquail.
Ooh, Iquail on mute before change? What?
I'm sorry. I'm old school. In person. I love y'all.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think we also have to think about this differently, right? We have to broaden this out way beyond just like the presentation of our work. Because as someone said on Facebook, dance isn't the acquisition of steps. The acquisition of steps is one piece of that puzzle, but dancing is first and foremost, the ability to make decisions out of the skills you have in real time through the physicalization of the body in space with energy and with some sort of sound, whether you call that music. And that doesn't just happen with the acquisition of steps, right? Or how do you learn your dancing body if you're just trying to move around the couch? But even more so than that, I think bigger about this. I think that my needs in 2 years, when high school kids have graduated from schools without physical training, what does that mean for the pool of resource that I'll have in terms of being able to create on dancing bodies? What does it mean in terms of college admissions when high school students don't get dance classes, but yet the PWIs and the spaces, or even the structures we have by how we audition, how we evaluate dancers, continues to be the same space as if COVID-19 never happened? And what does that do to already under-resourced people who don't get the access to their mom and dad was in the principal dancer with the brochure and they live in a house and can get adequate training? What does that look like for also, like, it's a much bigger thing. So, you know, my needs are also having people pay attention to the effects of COVID-19 2 to 5 years after physical distancing, right? Because I will still be suffering the effects of it, and I'll still be evaluated. Well, what's your production values? Well, I couldn't have a theater space, but you're still judging me based on production values, even 5 years after COVID-19. Like, I think it's such a bigger thing that I think my need is that we all need to
definitely
on every structure, on every system, on every
yes.
level, because it affects every aspect of our organizations.